And there's a big kitchen box that goes in these cutouts here. And the bulk of those cans will be stored underneath. So you can fit 2 deep those 20 mil rocket boxes.
How
in
many?
here.
Two?
So you can fit 4 across or 5 across. So you can fit about 10, 9, we'll call them 8 cans here. Maybe 10.
So where is this?
What's that?
Where is this? People sit here?
Well, there's lots more layers.
Oh, okay.
So then typically along these rails, there'll be the silver boxes over there with the white lids. There'll be 4 or 5 on each side, and those hold the bulk of the food. And then there'll be 1 or 2 of those 20 mils that get rigged in.
Mm-hmm.
But typically the food and the trash will be down and underneath. So then on top of this all goes people's bags. And then we have these big tarps that we will fold over the top, and then they get tied down. So then in the back here, there'll be 2 more of those big coolers. And then there's 2 bars that go across, kind of right by where Fritz is standing, where the lunch cooler will go. And then propane tanks go kind of in that space back there.
Cool.
So there's room along these rails. Typically on a regular rig, there'll be a box with bread about where Fritz is standing. And then another kind of like a dry goods cooler that has onions and potatoes and melons and stuff like that. That's stuff that needs to stay kind of climate controlled, but not cold, but not hot. So we keep those kind of there. And then there's added spaces kind of like where that orange box is.
Every trip's a little different,
or a
depending
lot
on
different.
what they're doing and how long the trip is and how many people. But in generally, like all this, the pans and the rails are all full of stuff. Boxes of stuff, science gear, food, and personal equipment, camp equipment.
So having something that could serve a dual purpose, you know, having a box that starts out, you know, we can afford to have room for 1 or maybe 2 empty ones at the start of the trip. But as the trip goes and supplies are consumed, that you know, the one box that serves as a food storage box then can turn into a compost box.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we do with the trash. Is we'll have on the shorter trips, we'll have individual meals packed in individual boxes. So it's time for meal 1, and you pull all the food out and you cook the food, and then the trash goes into that box.
Oh, okay. All right.
On the longer trips, then we'll typically start off with 1 box that's the trash box, and then we'll have, because on a 20-day trip you can't really have 20 boxes of food. There just isn't the space. So we spread out the food in different places, and we'll just kind of shuffle supplies around to make room as the trip goes on. That's one of the things about, you know, these long trips, is that there's never enough space ever. You could always have more space, but
So it sounds like maybe a permanent compost area would be not sufficient, or
well,
not
as long as
efficient.
it could be used to store other stuff briefly.
Yeah, I don't know. That'd be some trips where people would go, we're not taking that.
Yeah.
But there'd be other trips where they'd have room for such a thing, like the idea of just having some box that stays on the rail that you could dump into.
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a possibility. I'd say not maybe on 100% of the trips, and then that's where I also mentioned the rowboats might not work on that. But I'd say, you know, maybe on 60-70% of the trips, having a dedicated box could work, but not on all of them probably. I kind of like that idea, just having like a pickle bucket in camp and then just dumping it in.
Yeah.
Because then when we get back here, we could just use the forklift to pick it up.
Yeah.
I like that idea, except for the trips where they're going to go, there's not room for that.
Right. You know, one of the places where I could see there definitely being room and a place for it would be on the tribal trips, where there's a lot of people and there's not a lot of gear.
Mm-hmm.
And like on the tribal trip that I did last year, the whole front pan was, you know, that had a couple of 20 mils in there and then some like cases of soda pop and stuff. And instead of having the coolers all in one place, you know, the reason that we load all the stuff on this one boat is so that that boat over there can be reserved for all the science gear, which is sometimes there's a ton of it and sometimes there's not a ton of it. But we were able to spread out the stuff so that there really wasn't a whole lot of stuff. But there's a lot of people. You know, there was like 22 people on that trip. So,
Yeah, I could see like a silver box.
yeah. And typically on these trips where there are a lot of people, there's more boats and more room. You know, it's on these goofball ones where the whole crew hikes in somewhere and you got 20 people for, 16 days in one boat. That's not going to work. But then they have the
So
helicopter. to fly them all
can you
around.
clarify what you mean by 20 mil and 40 mil?
Well, a 20 mil box is these boxes this is a 20 mil
That we
box.
just waved.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know what a 40.
I thought you
is.
said 40.
Yeah,
Am I
there's a
wrong?
20. So these are called 20 millimeter rocket boxes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And there's different sizes of those. You know, we have some that we store like way over on the left. I believe those are called 25 mil, and they're another inch and a half.
Yeah, she gave me that.
They're just a
dimension.
little bit. They're a little bit wider, but they're the same height and the same depth, but just a little bit wider. And those are the two, and those silver boxes those are the typical sizes of stuff that we store stuff in.
Cool.
And
And one of
square
those
is
silver boxes is actually the width of 3 20 mils.
Oh, perfect.
And the silver ones are just only for food, correct? Like it's for
food or gear.
Okay.
We put different things in the silver boxes don't latch.
Okay.
They're not necessarily air watertight. They're definitely not airtight. That said, you could put a latch on one or a bird spout.
Yeah.
Absolutely.